fiddler, I go back to 1950, probably 1950 professionally. I teach violin 1 day a week. I've got 2 children, one's 11, one's 13. They won the Fiddlers at the Mountain at the State Fair at the Ag Center, and they also won first in Georgia this weekend, and they perform at the Shindig quite regularly.
I started out playing in right in the community here, actually, playing for the little private dances or parties they would have at the houses, you know, and I went from that to playing the local radio shows with my brother and some other local guys, and then from that I got, later on, I got into gospel music. I played with some local groups here for a while, and then I turned professional. I went on the road with the Kingsmen Quartet and stayed with them for a number of years, and also the Pine Ridge Boys out of, well, we did our TV work out of Augusta, and stayed with them a year or so. And then after that I came back. I left the Kingsmen and came with the Stony Creek Boys in 1975. Here's a lesson too late for the learning, made of sand. And we compliment ourselves in your hand, in your hand. Are you going away with no word of farewell? Will there be not a trace left behind? I could have loved you better, didn't mean to be unkind. You know that was the last thing on my mind. You got reason plenty for going. This I know, this I know. For the weeks have been steadily growing. Please don't go, please don't go. Are you going away with no word of farewell? Will there be not a trace left behind? I could have loved you better, didn't mean to be unkind. You know that was the last thing on my mind. Before World War II, even, I can remember as a kid, we only had a few two-lane highways out of these mountains. We did not have an airport of any size here, so the only thing we had, we were kind of isolated in here, and we had people from similar backgrounds, and we enjoyed the same things, and we had to kind of make our own entertainment. So it's been a hand-me-down thing, you know, from people coming from Ireland, Scotland, and things like that. A lot of the tunes and the entertainment was kind of a hand-me-down from that, and so we did that, and it's come right on up through the years. You know, we're still a little bit isolated here, and we still kind of hang on to traditions. It's part of our culture.
This way, you can see the Cane River Gap, and the mountain behind that is in Yancey County. Got 7 layers of mountains back to that. Right back this way, you can see Madison County. Back this way, you can see Pisgah. You can see Pisgah, I mean, it's plain. When it's really plain, you can see the tower on Mitchell, Pisgah. The garrisons came here to the United States and about 16 and 50 and landed in Baltimore. Well, we've been right in this particular place since 1907. My granddaddy bought it in 1907. But he was raised, I'd say 3 miles, maybe a little more from here. My great-granddaddy was. And he went up to Sugar Creek and up in there and married a woman up there. And her two brothers went down there and married his sister. So his doubles are going away. My mama's family was black, and it's an old family in here. But at that time, way back then, the blacks were kind of a drifter, a sharecropper. And I reckon whichever pasture that was greenest, offered them the most, that's where they went. I was born in 1923. Well, in 1970, before that, my daddy had to have a leg off. And I started carving a little bit, you know, doing this and that. My dad, when he had his leg off, then he had his leg off, the other leg off, and I quit my job, and I didn't have nothing to do but whittle. I couldn't even go to the store. I had to be here 24 hours a day. And I don't like to tell this, but it's the truth. But I drove myself so hard that I lost my voice for 6 solid months. I could talk, but it sounded like a frog. And I'd be sitting at the table with my mom and dad. They'd ask my sister what I said. Now, that's how bad it was. I started dancing the doll that year that I went down there in 1971. I didn't even have a doll. I was dancing another fellow's doll. He said, if you'll learn how to dance that, said, we'll have some fun. He could pick a banjo, but I don't say he'd take #1 on the stage. And I went to fool around there and played a little bit. And he was awfully scary. He was a character if you ever seen one. He said, I believe you're the best on that I ever seen. And whatever he thought of, that's what he said. I don't care. If you liked it, that's fine. If you didn't like it, he said it anyway. And was raised over yonder in Watauga County. His backwoods is, oh, get out. I mean, more country than I live in, or ever have lived in. At one time, it was 2 miles to the grocery store, and no road. They had to drag it in with the oxen and a sled, or either had to carry it on their back. I made that log house, sitting right here. My mom never seen her daddy. He died before she was born. And that house is made on the same style as the house my mother was raised in.
Nice.
And the woman that lived there, that raised my mother, she had 16 kids of her own. Right. And she took my brother, my uncle, and my mom, and they raised them. There's an old maid ain't stayed there. I made my first one, I guess, about 1972. This is Jake, named him after my granddaddy. Well, I'm always doing something crazy, so I guess this one went up. Make it make a little more noise, especially if it's outside. Well, the other one, I had to do a hip replacement on. Wore out. I was going to have to replace it or move it. So I took a piece of the bell and put it down on the inside of that thing through my hip joints. I wear an old crazy hat on. I don't like a new hat. If somebody gave me a new hat, I'd crush it before I started wearing it. I've got 3 right over in the corner, two up here on top, and two on the top back of the couch. And I always wear a crushed hat. Well, I wanted a derby. I didn't care whether it was this high or not, but I wanted one. And I knew a real leather crafter over in Spruce Pine. I asked him about it, and I didn't know whether he was working on it or not. I didn't know. But we went to Cincinnati on a craft show, and well, we was down at Raleigh first. Went down to Raleigh, and I went by his booth and give him a mule with a complete set of leather harness on it. About that high. Well, I don't thought much about my hat. We was getting ready to go to Cincinnati, and when we met up to leave, he laid this hat right over in my lap. Now that's the trade of the hat. I was out at a school, Glen Arden School, and a fellow's out there entertaining. I had on this hat. He said, "What did you take for it?" I said, "I don't guess I better wear it a while." I said, "I was offered $100 for that." He said, "Will you take two?" I said, "No, I guess I better wear it a while." He said, "Would you take three?" No, I said, "I guess I better keep it a while." And I would have sold it to him if it hadn't been for that fellow. You know, he's a real good friend of mine. And I'd have probably had the hat. But well, I seen the fellow after that. I was telling him about it. I said, "Why didn't you let him have it?" He said, "I'd have made you another." I said, "Now you tell me." Old Zeke's been to the World's Fair in '82 in Knoxville. I didn't go down there for that. I went down there to demonstrate to Whitley. And the Otway 4 was down there, and they found out I could dance a doll, and they wouldn't hardly dance. They wouldn't hardly play with it if I didn't dance a doll. Well, I broke an arm off. I didn't have nothing to make no arm out of. So I went over to the blacksmith over there, and he made me two out of iron. And they were so heavy, you know, I couldn't dance that doll. He'd throw that doll, I'd have killed her, and I couldn't get a step to save my life. I just took the other arm off and danced him without any arm. That's a complete operation of the United States government for about 2 years anyway. All you could get on your television was something about Watergate. Whether it was true or not, I don't know, but that's all you could get. This right here shows you where Henry Kissinger went. This is the old elephant, and he's listening to what the Democrats are saying. Right here's an 18-minute tape that didn't have a thing in the world on it. They played it for 3 solid months. And every time they played it, they said there wasn't nothing on it. I'm sure they got enough of it. I did. Here's our wheat going to Russia at $1.50 a bushel. Russia tried to sell that wheat back to us for $8 a bushel. And I'm surprised to death that we didn't buy it, because we know how to do business whether we make any money or not. Here's the Watergate. There's Senate. You pull this thing, there's the tape that run. I told him you couldn't tell where Henry Kissinger was by the time somebody asked you where he's at, the time you got him told he'd be somewhere else anyway. The politics is all right if they could change them political people into statesmen instead of running them as politicians. I'd love it. 'Cause it wasn't that Nathan Hale said, I regret that I've got but one life to give for my country. Now they say, I regret that I've got but one country to waste while I'm in office. You couldn't even get a piece of furniture in my shop right now. I'm telling you, that's the messed up place that's ever been. A lot of places your feet won't even touch the floor. If you got enough nerve, you can go into it. It won't hurt the shop. I tell them, I can't put nothing in there but water, and you have to stand outside and dash it in. If you say this shop ain't messed up, I know there's something wrong with you. I built this, and I never did get the stuff in here and arranged like I wanted it to start with. And after you get it so full, it's hard to arrange it. Had the leather saddle on. I whittled that out of leather.
Harold, this is all beautiful. You ought to be, and I'm sure you are real proud of your work.
Well, I enjoyed.
Love shack in the North Carolina hill. Yeah, cruise stream where you used to
Of course, I was born here in Asheville, Blue Avenue, June 10th, 1920. And after, well, my dad worked at the Carolina Furniture Factory, Woodland. And the Depression came along, then we moved to Madison County. And of course, we stayed out there, I guess, about 7 years. Things started picking up, so he had to come back in and get him another job. So, and of course, the main thing concerning the country, of course, I liked it all right. Well, we was there until, gosh, I don't know, we were about 12, 13 years, I guess. So when things started picking up, Dad moved back into the bunker. Yeah, I had a dog. Well, of course, I picked it from a litter. Had a white face on one side, the black on the other. I wouldn't took nothing for my dog, but my dad was a trader. Traded my dog and got a guitar in the trade. And I didn't even fool that guitar for a while, because I'd bet him trading my dog, you know. But finally, my first cousin came out and showed me how to tune it. So he stayed about a week with me and showed me a few chords. I mean, wrote them down, and which ones to use during the song and so forth. But of course, from the time I was about 3-year-old, they turned the record on, which my dad kept all the time. Every time I went to town, he'd buy a new one. So at that time, I knew plenty of songs. so just about the other night, then I could sit down and play some. Got in when my first cousin came out. Stayed with me a week. So I got so I could do fairly well. Later, of course, I visited in Black Mountain then until we started to move back into Buncombe County. Well, I started, I imagine, at about 14 when I started learning to play the guitar. And then, well, of course, I still learn now. Of course, I can't play one good. But anyway, we lived in Madison, I told you. I'd grab that old guitar and take off to a Saturday night jamboree that, let's see, what was his name? I forgot. But anyway, that guy was over that up there. I don't know whether you remember, he killed himself later. And so we went to that. I wrote them a letter, and then they gave me a date to come in and show up. So I went up there, and that first night, well, of course, that time they'd paying, you know, $10 for the winner. So that night I won. I just played by myself. And so the next week, I had some help, but I didn't get the 10. But later I did get, with the group, you know, I got another 10. I started with WISC on Saturday mornings. We had a Saturday morning show, the Carolina Sunshine Boys. So then, of course, we played in Greenville, South Carolina. We was down there at that station for about, I'd say about 2 months. I mean, during the time that we was in radio. But we was about 3 different times we was at WISC. That's when I was up there in the Land Green Hotel. You know about where that was. Just be a, well, of course we had a band in for us, so. At that time we neither one had a car, and we both lived out in this section at that time. We just get up on Saturday morning, take off up there, and be wide awake by the time we got up there and open Wiggleville up there walking up there. Radio station to play. So and that fellow that plays the fiddle with well, after we first played up here, I guess about 6 months at WISC, then we went to Kingsport, Tennessee. Played over there for about 6 months, I guess. Then, of course, later through the years, we went down to Greenville, South Carolina, down there about 3 or 4 weeks. Well, we had a show in Kingsport, Tennessee. Friday night, we put up there that, and so we decided we'd go into Knoxville the next morning. I'd heard about, well, of course, you know, all those guys at KNOX in Knoxville. We decided we'd go over there that day, and I was over there. So met her outside. She was out there ready to go into the audience. So of course we started writing, and I guess about 100 years then we wrote, and then then I just finally brought her up here. So.
I played with Carol Ray and the Carolina Mountain Boys for the last almost 7 years, up until Carol developed Alzheimer's. I've known Carol basically all my life. I met him when I was probably about 5 years old. Him and my dad used to work together. We played at the Mountain Dancing Folk Festival and at the fair for the last 4 years, up until this year. He's taught me a lot throughout the years. He's had several different groups. The house band at the Shindig on the Green, Stony Creek Boys, their lead guitar player, Lenore Namm, was in Carol's first band. So they've known each other basically all their life. They were probably about 15 years old about that time. He's a good man and a good friend, and he's taught me a lot throughout the years.
Down on the hills from Bud, so I'm heading back to Tumble Run Shack in the Carolina girl I love. No matter where I roam, the Carolina moon is always in my memory. I love the girl of mine in the hills of Carolina, where moonlight and love are free. I cherish the memory of the Carolina moon and the little girl who said she'd be true. Oh, the moon is shining bright on my sweetheart tonight. Little sweetheart, I'm coming back to you. For Swanee, no river flows gently along beneath the Carolina moon. There I know she waits for me beneath the old pine tree. I'll be seeing her again now pretty soon. No matter where I roam, that Carolina moon is always in my memory. I love that girl of mine in the hills of Carolina, where moonlight and love is free. From the time I was about 2 years old, of course my dad, every time he went into Asheville, well, we lived in Asheville, but every time he was out he'd get a record. I got to sing with them, so I was doing pretty good by the time I was, I'd say 8 or 10 years old. That's where I first started singing. Another day I'm going back to that little pine coal shack, back to that cabin again. How happy I would be if the old folks I could see in the little pine coal cabin down the lane. In the lane, how I'd love to be there again. In the lane, in that little pine coal cabin down the lane. As I stand here today,
he's almost, a lot of times I almost felt like he was the grandpa I never had, to be honest with you, because he was, right after Dad died, Carol, it was about the time me and Carol started playing together. My father passed away about 92, 93. And I hung around Carol a lot. I don't know, he kind of took the place of Dad in a lot of ways.
Hi folks, I'm Joel Wilson. I'm known around here in Asheville, Spartanburg as a mountain musician. I was born on my grandfather Joe Wilson's farm over there, and the eldest of 8 children. And my dad was a farmer there at that time. He was also a fiddle player, and my mother was a singer. I think I inherited some of my musical talent, what little I have, from both my mother and my father. And we moved down to my mother's farm over to a little community called Mill Spring, North Carolina. That's just off of Highway 9, and actually it was a little community named Pea Ridge, where they raised mostly cotton and corn and sweet potatoes and Irish potatoes and molasses cane and this type of thing. I managed to graduate school at Mill Spring, North Carolina, and the year was 1944. And it was a patriotic time because the war was going kind of up and down fashion in Europe and over in Asia too. So I joined the United States Merchant Marine. I was too young, he wouldn't have me in anything else. Well, by that time, I was starting to pick the guitar and sing. I had picked that up around these country stores here at Pea Ridge, over different places around the county, and we also had a talking machine there at the house. It was RCA Victor, and we had records on there. It was made by a recording artist. Now, for a number of years when I was small, we didn't have electricity, so we had to use a battery-powered and a spring-driven Victrola to make our music. Well, now my mother, she played a pedal organ, and my daddy played a fiddle. And a lot of nights after supper, we'd have music on either a front porch, back porch, or back room, we call it. And some of the neighbors would come by, maybe with guitars and mandolins, and we'd play and sing 2 or 3 hours. So that's the way I picked up a lot of songs from my mother. She had them written down, and she was able to start off singing a lot of religious songs, which I enjoyed very much. I got to the point where I would take a guitar and an old toe sack. I'd never had a case for a long time, and go to a country store a lot of times on Saturday evening, and there'd usually be another guy or two there that had instruments of some kind, like another guitar or even a mandolin, and we'd play those, and usually we'd sit around outside on Coca-Cola crates. Made a very good, comfortable seat if you had enough of them piled up together. Well, anyhow, a year or two slipped by, and it was time for me to go off in service. But I was still too young to get in the Navy or Army, so I caught a Greyhound bus one evening and went up to Norfolk, Virginia. And I told them that I wanted to do something to help the war effort, and something like ship out to sea. So they snatched me right in the office and signed me up, shipped me to Brooklyn, New York, and gave me a few very short weeks of training, and they told me I was a real qualified merchant seaman now. So they sent me to sea. Well, I did that until the end of the war. Then I came back home, and there was a lot of change in the air. A lot of fellows had been off, and a lot of them had been this place and that. And, well, I'd been about halfway around the world by that time, but I was curious by nature. I wanted to see the rest of the world. So I enlisted in the U.S. Naval Reserve. And sure enough, things were rocking along there pretty good. And then the Korean War came along. Well, the next thing I knew, they had called me in the Naval Reserve. I was stationed out of Spartanburg at that time. And they called me up to Baltimore, Maryland for some more training in marine technology. So they sent me up there and sent me to school and a few weeks, and they said that I was a bartender. So that suited me fine, and I served on ships there during the Korean War and went to different places in the world, usually on machine shop ships and this type of thing. But I never quit playing the music. I always had an old cheap guitar on the ship with me, and my shipmates found out I had this talent for music and singing and picking, and they'd always come around when we had a little time off from our duty there, and we'd pick and sing sometimes 2 or 3 hours at night. And also, when we was in port in New York City, there was another place I liked to hang out, and it was named Pepsi-Cola Canteen. And the reason for that was this. First, they had free Pepsi-Cola to drink, and second, hamburgers only cost a nickel in those days, and they had free musical instruments. And usually they had a mandolin or a guitar too. Anyhow, something that was somebody had turned into them. It was just about completely worn out, but there's a little life yet left in it. And we'd get those, and we'd make us a little ragtime band or Dixieland band or whatever you have there, and do some numbers that we had learned in various parts of the world in our travels. Well, after a while, I decided to get out of the service, so I went back to North Carolina, and went back to the old home place and where I grew up, down at Mill Springs and Pea Ridge. But like so many others, I found that it had changed a good deal. So I grew restless. I got me a job over here in a plant in Tryon, working with nylon hosiery and machinery and knitting nylon hosiery. And that is where I met my wife, and we married about a year later, and I say to this day, that was one of the best deals I ever made, was meeting up with her, because we now have 2 fine children. We have a daughter who lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we have a son who lives here in Columbus, and between them both, they have had us 4 grandchildren. So we've been blessed all the way around, and I'm just thankful to all the people that helped me with my music all along the way, and for my service and my service record. And I kept playing after I got out of the Navy last time. Found a place over here in Columbus. The man's name was J.C. Hutchinson. And we'd play over there on Saturday nights, sometimes Friday nights. And then I found another place down in Spartanburg, Marvin Newman's TV shop, and we'd play down there on Friday nights. And then at one time they had another place here in Landrum, Leroy Prince. He was a fine banjo player and guitar player too. And we'd play down there at his house on Saturday night, usually 3 or 4 hours. And well, it was a happy pastime. I never made no money at it, but I met $1 million worth of good friends. And many of those friends are my friends right today. So I'm very proud of that. I always enjoyed reading newspapers. As a matter of fact, from the time I was about 14 or 16, I made it a point to read 2 or 3 newspapers every day. Well, I was going through the social pages of the Asheville newspaper here one Saturday morning, and the year was about 1966, and I saw where they was holding tryouts that night for people who were going to play at the Shindig in front of the courthouse around about 5:30 or 6:30. So I had no pickup truck at the time. Well, I put a couple of guitars in there that night in case I broke the strings off of one. I was a pretty hard picker in those days, so carried two of them with me, and I went on up and parked there. I got there early, and I had me some lunch up there at a little place at the top of the hill. I went on down. Well, I met a young fellow there with, his name was Jerry Israel. Now, Jerry at that time was with the Chamber of Commerce here in Asheville, and I told him what my business was, who I was, and where I was from, and he said, "You see that old hay wagon over there?" And boy, it was piled high with hay, and had a pitchfork in the back of it. And look, well, it was realistic. It was real. It's fresh off the farm, and I guess the hay had been cut there too. But anyhow, it was parked over in front of a big rock monument. And he said, "Just ease over there behind that wagon." And he said, "I want you to whip me off a few bars of the type of songs you're going to pick here tonight." And I said, "Well, that's fair enough, Mr. Israel." I said, "That won't be no problem for me." So I remember the songs I did. I did one entitled Good Old Mountain Dew, which was written right there in Asheville by Mr. Lunsford. Now, Nashville bought that song from him folks and changed a lot of words in it, but it was still his property, and he sang it for me one night at the festival up here and picked it on a 5-string banjo. But anyhow, I picked it that night on the guitar, and I said to Jerry, I said, "Do you want one more?" And I said, "Now this one is an old one that my mother taught me, and it's about some country down east of here. It's a romance that went wrong." And he said, "Oh yes, do that one." And he said, "What's the name of it?" I said, "The Greenback Dollar Blues." So I whipped him off a few bars and chords of the Greenback Dollar Blues and sang it. And he said, "Yes." He said, "That's exactly what we want here tonight." And he said, "I hope you've got some more prepared in case they want more." And I said, "Well, Jerry," I said, "you're a man after my own heart." I said, "I just happen to have several, like Red River Valley and Going Down the Road Feeling Bad Blues, and just most any kind of mountain tune or fiddle tune." I said, "I know a lot of fiddle tunes that I can play on the guitar and sing the words to them." He said, "That'd be fine." So that's the way I got started, was on the Shindig. And the way I remember it, folks, there was only about 5 acts in the house band there that night. And I was about the second or third act that went on. And after a little while, they ran out of acts. There wasn't no more people there to play. So what I did, I went off the stage. I went over and told Jerry, and I said, "I'm going to be picking across the tree with street with the group over there under the magnolia tree." It was very tiny, and there was a bunch of little boys swinging on it and kids. It looked like to me that they was going to break the limbs off of it. It was a young tenor. So finally, Jerry Israel, he came over there and gently chased the little boys out and told them, said, "Look now, we can't strip the trees. That belongs to the city of Asheville." So they got out of the tree, and he said to me, "Joe," said, "very shortly now, I'm going to give you a sign." And he said, "You come back over there." And he said, "I want you to do a cowboy song, say like Red River Valley, and a fiddle tune, say like Little Birdie Take Me Home, and some things like that on the guitar." And he said, "I've got to make up a little time here tonight." I said, "I understand, Jerry." I said, "Just give me a sign how many you want." And he thanked me, and that's the way I got started playing. on the Shindig, and every Saturday night I got an invite to come back the next Saturday night, which tickled me pink. Folks, I've been going to the Shindig every Saturday night from 1966 until approximately 2000. I had a sickness that I couldn't cope with. I had 4 strokes to the area of my neck and head, and I became down, bedridden, sick, and the doctor said that I may never play again, I may never walk again. But they were wrong, folks. I'm already back picking a little bit. I've been walking since about a month or 2 after they gave me the bad news. But now, the one thing they didn't tell me about at that time, and I suppose they didn't know it, because I'm a blind man today. But, folks, I'm also learning to cope with that. Folks, this President McKinley song is a song about a president being shot in the year 1902. It's a historical song. And the fellow that shot him was a disgruntled office seeker. And his name was Mr. Suzanne. And there's a verse in this song that says, "Now look here, Mr. Soldier, see what you've done. You shot our president with a 44 gun. Gonna die, he's gonna die."
Now McKinley's in the graveyard, taking his rest. Betty's in the White House, doing it down Washington. But hush, little children, please don't you cry. You draw your daddy's pension the day that we die. Down Washington.
Now, folks, this happened right before the Shindig started one night. And my group was sitting there, we'd been picking around the magnolia tree. And we called it the College of Musical Knowledge. Well, anyhow, this fellow was dressed up to the T, and you could tell that he was one of Asheville's upper crust. And he came around and was talking to us, and he stopped by where I was. I think I was putting on a guitar string I'd just recently broken. But anyhow, I said to him, "Sir," I says, "do you happen to remember things that happened long years ago here in Asheville?" He said, "Well," he said, "Sonny boy," he said, "some of them I do." And I said, "Well, sir," I said, "did you ever happen to remember when Thomas Wolfe was young and selling newspapers here in Asheville?" He said, "Yes, laddie." He said, "That I do." And said, "I remember him well." Said he was my newsboy for a number of years. And I said, "Well," I said, "how did he do?" And he said, "Well, he was very good as a newsboy, son, at selling newspapers. But," he said, "you know, I always figured he made a bad move when he went from selling newspapers into writing them."